Hi, Jeremy. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be back.
Okay, so what's new with LinkedIn since we last connected, which I think was in like 2022, 2023,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah. So there's definitely been some good and some bad. And I think that in the interest of fairness, we'll cover both sides just so folks know what's happening. So I think just to start with the challenges, there are two things that come to mind. The first one is just macroeconomically, the whole world of white collar professionals is pretty tough right now. I know
Yeah,
national headlines are saying, hey, there's still robust hiring, but I don't think it's necessarily equally distributed across the economy because we see hiring freezes, we see layoffs. So that's definitely a reality. In terms of LinkedIn in particular, at the exact same time that people are looking for work, LinkedIn is making it a little bit harder. So one of the things that's happened at LinkedIn is as the company has become more mature and a lot of their traditional business lines, like selling stuff to recruiters, selling stuff to marketers, have kind of plateaued, they're trying to squeeze more money out of job seekers. And
yeah,
so a
I've
lot of your
noticed that.
listeners may have noticed, yeah, that if you want to send a personalized invite now, you are limited to like 5 or 10 a month. You can only send 200 characters versus 300 characters. They're getting rid of this group hack where you could message anyone inside a group for free. And so basically trying to drive you towards LinkedIn Premium. But the good news is I have hacks for all of those things. So
Oh,
happy to
good,
talk about the
because
good side as
I
well.
have been really annoyed by I'm always adding connections and I love to send notes, especially if I don't know someone. And it just happened to me the other day where they were like, you can't send a note unless you pay for premium. And I was like, what? This is new and very irritating. Okay, so those are some of the challenges. What about some, let's talk about the positives that have been happening in 2024.
Yes, I think one big positive is now we have all these AI tools to really level up our job seeking game. And I want to be really clear. LinkedIn is going to say, hey, use our AI tools. Oh, you only have to buy LinkedIn Premium and it's $50 a month.
Yeah.
Versus here's the reality. The best AI tools are the free ones we've all been using for the last year. ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot. And if you apply those in the right way, you can make them work on LinkedIn without paying a cent. So that's the first good news.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, that is really good news.
Yeah, we'll get way into the specific prompts and techniques during the conversation. And then number two, there are still lots of great workarounds if you want to reach out to someone. And as we probably talked about last time, there is such a massive advantage to getting a referral, getting someone on the inside to go to bat for you. And if you want to make that happen, even in spite of LinkedIn's challenges, you can still go to a tool like hunter.io, look up someone's email address, and actually still reach out the old fashioned way without paying LinkedIn a cent. So good ways to get around some of these challenges.
So it's hunter.io. That's
Yes.
the whole website. And then what does that do? It tells you
Yeah.
the person's email address.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, if you were to go onto Hunter, you could say, show me the email address format for LinkedIn.com. Maybe I want to get a job there so I can fix these terrible policies. It will show you that the most common format is first initial, full last name at LinkedIn.com. And now you can pretty much guess anyone's email. And of course, email is free.
Yes. One thing I've also noticed too, a little email hack is once you start typing in the name, at least I use Gmail, if that email is correct, it will pop up with their like name. You know what I mean? So it's like Gmail
Exactly.
basically letting you know, like, yes, that email belongs to a real person. So instead of like, if I wrote L McGoodwin at Gmail and nothing popped up, but if I did Lauren.McGoodwin at Gmail and then all of a sudden that popped up, then I know I got the right one.
That's
Okay,
exactly right.
that I love that you're gonna like give us the specific tools on this episode too. Um, okay, but let's also talk about why, even though there's pros and cons to LinkedIn, why does LinkedIn matter, really more than ever right now? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit. We're in a very tough job market, which is so strange because I feel like the economy is doing very well, but the job market is really tough. And if you just go on LinkedIn, you will see a lot of very sad
Yeah.
posts on there and things like that. So why does LinkedIn like matter more than ever in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the reality is whenever times get tough, doesn't mean that hiring has stopped. It just means there are more competitors for each job. And so we have to compete a little bit harder. And the big hack, of course, is that the vast majority of job seekers, 93%, according to recent stats, don't bother to network. They're just applying online, going to the same old job boards, putting in the same old resumes, versus that 7% of candidates who actually get referred have a 10x advantage in terms of getting interviews and getting offers. And so if you've got the guts to go out there and play that slightly longer game, it's a much more successful game because you're a lot more likely to get hired.
It's hard for me to even comprehend the 93.7%, mostly because I'm probably in this world. And I know that everyone listening to this podcast probably knows that my rule is like, you have not finished applying for a job if you have not sent your resume to directly to a person. And my advice is usually like go on LinkedIn and see if you can find the recruiter or even better, the hiring manager. For example, when I got hired at Hulu, I sent my resume not to a recruiter, but to a hiring manager who then
Yes.
forwarded it to the recruiter. And sometimes I almost think that's the better hack because recruiters are always getting emails, and it's like, and it takes a little digging kind of to try to figure out like who might be the hiring manager or at least someone on your team. But I feel like the recruiters always or definitely look at emails that come from hiring managers more often than like someone cold in their inbox. Have you ever found that to be true also?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I always recommend is go to LinkedIn, put these two magic words into the search box. I'm hiring. And what you're going to see is that there are all these hiring managers like myself who are like, wait a second, we have to hire someone who's going to change the course of our lives because they're either going to make us look good to our bosses or they're going to make us look terrible. We want to find the best people. We don't always want to wait around. And so they're raising their hand saying, hey, if you are a rock star in X field, please contact me. But because a lot of job seekers just go back to online applications, they're missing out on those signals.
Yeah. One of your, you just shared a really good hack too is you can type in I'm hiring and then you can filter for posts that were posted in the last 24 hours on LinkedIn. I have really enjoyed this where back in the day, nobody like would brag about the fact that they were hiring, right? And now it's like a really cool thing that if you're hiring, you pretty much want to let everyone know on LinkedIn. And so now I feel like when you filter the post for I'm hiring, and especially if you do it within 24 hours, because I think right now in the current job market, it does give you a leg up to be one of the first people to apply. So that's a really good hack, just that alone, which is I don't even a few years ago that wasn't as common, and now, like I said, it's sort of this like badge of honor to be like I'm hiring for my team. And to your point, like recruiters will do it, but hiring managers really love to do it, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it's literally a badge on LinkedIn now. There's that
Yeah,
open to work badge, which is very controversial. We can talk about that.
yeah.
But there's also the I'm hiring badge, and people love that.
Yeah, let's actually talk about the controversy. So this is the badge that you can put on your profile that says I'm open to work. It's kind of this like green color. Um, and there's been a lot of debate about whether you should put it on or not put it on. What's your advice?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because obviously people have very strongly held feelings here. The people said, I talked to a recruiter who said, that just makes you look desperate. It's a badge of shame, not a badge of honor. And
Yeah.
then other people say, oh, it's super useful. It helps me figure out that you're in the game. But the reality is, I put out one of those LinkedIn polls to about 1,000 recruiters and hiring managers, and 90% of them said I couldn't care less one way or another. And so I think that we should spend less time worrying about that and more about the things that really do matter behind the scenes. Like, are you getting those referrals? Are you reaching out to the hiring manager? Are you basically out competing other folks in the space?
Okay, so let's focus on that, which is let's start with optimizing your profile and then let's get your tips for standing out more, whether you're applying for a job, building your personal brand. We can talk about those. And I know you have some AI tips, but I think no matter what you're doing for your outreach, your profile has to be great, right? Like that's going to be the first thing that people look at. It's like your first impression. So let's talk about you've got 5 steps to creating a better LinkedIn profile in 2024. And the reason why the year is important is because it's always changing. So let's talk about your very first tip, which is having a clear focus. So talk more about that.
Yeah. So I think the number one thing where people tend to go awry is they're like, okay, I heard Lauren's show. I know I have to have a good LinkedIn profile. All right, I gotta check that box off. And so they're going through it and they're like, headline, I don't know, about section, I don't know. And the reason they don't know is because they don't have the clear focus. And
Yeah.
here's the most important thing. I want everyone to listen up really clearly. There is no such thing as a generically good LinkedIn profile, just a profile that's really good for a specific term and a specific position. And so the first step always is do your homework. If you are mid-career or coming out of school and you're not sure what to do with your life, spend a little time investing in research before you build the profile. And that means, especially in this age of AI, going to a tool like ChatGPT and saying, hey, here's my resume, or here's an Enneagram or a Myers-Briggs test that I did with my career coach. What do you think would be 10 job titles that are a good fit for my skills and interests? And ChatGPT will boil this ocean of opportunities and put it into the language of recruiters. Hey, Lauren, a recruiter over at Hulu, is actually searching for project managers or product marketing. These are the roles that match your skills and the things you love. And that way, if you can start to explore those roles a little bit, you have a lot more clarity when you build the profile.
Yeah, and that's for someone who doesn't have clarity. Then there's the person who's been a community manager and they were laid off and they're like, I want to continue being a community manager. I The point you're driving home, which I think is very important here, is that you can't be too generic. You have to be
Yes.
focused because nobody's going to go out of their way to help place you somewhere. So it's like you have to have an idea of what you want. Now, Jeremy, I know someone out there is listening and is like, but I'm interested in, learning and development, recruiting, and employee engagement. Aren't those all different? Like someone saying like they're similar, but they're different. What's your advice with the focus part of that?
Yeah, so I would love your take as a former recruiter. My sense is that you're allowed a certain amount of optionality. So if you're especially earlier in your career and you're like, hey, I'm trying to decide, do I do product management or product marketing? Totally fine, especially because those skills are so similar and
Yeah.
probably similar for the roles you mentioned as well. So if you can make a good case in your about section about it all comes from my interpersonal skills or my analytical skills, it all makes sense. But if you say product manager, entrepreneur, start a nonprofit, and do sales, now I'm really nervous as a headhunter because I just don't know that you're credible in any of those ways. What do you think,
Yeah,
Lauren?
I agree with you. I think it's almost like I like to think of things as like those are cousins of each other, like learning and development, employee engagement. They're all sort of in the same family. Maybe not they're not all called learning and development. I can live with that, but I want your story. So I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you point blank to explain it to me. And so you should just be prepared to be like the common theme that runs or the common thread that winds all my combines all my experiences is this. So I'm with you. I think it's fine, but when they get too far out of left field and very far apart from each other, I start to be like, this person would just take anything, and that doesn't help me. And the reason why it doesn't help, people might be asking, like, well, that person can do a bunch of stuff. Recruiters also work with hiring managers, and
Yes.
hiring managers maybe don't have as much imagination. It's like walking into a house that has no walls, and you're like, well, I can build the walls and furnish it. It's like they're not quite ready for that. So that's I think also your point about the tip is like a focus is like that's also what hiring managers want to see. So that's at least been my experience for sure. But that is such a good tip that the more focused you can be, the better you will be with your profile, but also with networking, right? Getting people to know what it is that you're interested in. That's another thing I've seen is a lot of people will share on LinkedIn, I was laid off, but they're not really sharing what it is they're looking for next. The
Yes.
people who are really good about here's what I'm looking for and here's how you can help me with that focus, it's like I'm sure a lot of people help them.
And you know what people are thinking right now, Lauren? They're like, Lauren, you are so good at this, like weaving these threads together into this really coherent tapestry. If anyone's like, I can't do that myself, here's a pro tip, go to ChatGPT. Say, I'm thinking about employee engagement and becoming a recruiter. How can I tell a coherent story? What are the commonalities? And I guarantee you, ChatGPT will find all these hidden linkages and help you tell that story well. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that you should paste in stuff from ChatGPT, but use it to get unstuck.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. So the tip you just talked about is going to be like used throughout your profile. But now let's get into a specific section of your
Yeah.
profile, which is your headline.
Yeah. So this is really interesting because I think a lot of people are coming to profiles from the world of resumes and they think the meat of the resume is always the experience or maybe the skills. Those are going to be the most important sections on LinkedIn too. And they are important, don't get me wrong. But the most important by far, in terms of getting the most weight in the LinkedIn algorithm, is surprise, surprise, that little headline.
I
And
know,
people are
the
always like,
smallest part.
what? Yeah, it's crazy. And it's very brevity that is the source of its strength because it's so character limited, just 220 characters. That means it's harder to game, it's more authentic, and it's a more important signal for the algorithm. So that's really where you want to start.
So somebody who has, for example, this is where you see on their profile like recruiter at Hulu. Like usually you see,
Yes,
but people who I think are much more clever about optimizing that section, they might say their job title and then they'll put other skills, right? Or these like keywords or phrases. So let's go back to the learning and development example. Instead of saying learning and development at Hulu, you might say learning and development, employee engagement, um, I don't know, talent acquisitions or something
yeah,
like that in your headline, right? Is that what you're saying? Almost like using more keywords and less focused only on your job title.
exactly. And there's two kinds of folks who I want to speak to here. I want to talk to free agents and people who are currently under contract. So free agents are students, career changers, people who are currently unemployed looking for the next role. You can put anything you want in your headline because you don't have a boss to worry about today. In that case, I would absolutely signal where you're headed. And even if you're not a product manager yet, call yourself an aspiring product manager or seeking product manager opportunities because the algorithm doesn't care. It is a heat seeking missile on that most important thing. Everything else is irrelevant. So that's how you get it in. Now, if you are not in that position and you have your hands sort of tied by the golden handcuffs of current employment, you're like, how can I sneak it in? I like what you said, Lauren. One other thing to call out is that the recruiter algorithm, what recruiters are using to search LinkedIn, also searches your open to work fields. And in open to work, you can list up to 5 different job titles that you're excited about. So if you don't feel comfortable changing your headline, because maybe your boss will find out, you can still put it there and put it into that stealth mode, recruiters only. And that way you're confident that the right people are seeing it, but not the wrong people.
Yeah, oh, that's a really good tip. Okay, let's talk about the about section and how to optimize that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem with about is that it used to be called summary, which made a lot of sense. And then LinkedIn called it about, and everyone's like, about what? So, as with everything on LinkedIn, as probably everything with job searching, you always have these two audiences. You've got the algorithm, which finds you, and you have the recruiter who chooses you. So let's walk through that delicate dance. If you want to be found, it's all based on keywords. Where are those keywords from? They're from the job description, the holy text of the job search. And so you want to make sure that those specialties, those skills end up in your about section. You can just list them in a long list. You can put them into bullet points. However you do it, make sure they're on there because you have 2,000 characters to work with, 10 times longer than your headline. And then to make sure you're actually selected by a human recruiter, think about what recruiters like Lauren are looking for. Not just a long laundry list of skills, but past performance is a great predictor of future performance. So can you knock Lauren's socks off by giving her a couple of sort of highlight reel versions of your career? Like, look at what I did over here. Look at my performance improvement. Look at my the revenue that I generated, and a clear sense of what you can do to answer Lauren's question: are you going to get me promoted or are you going to get me fired? Any
Yeah.
more tips there, Lauren, in terms of what you might look for in the about section as a recruiter?
No, I think those are all of them. One thing I think people struggle with is how to write it. And you guys, I'll put Jeremy and my LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But one thing I like structure. The structure of it, I think, is really
Yes.
important, right? And so the way I've structured mine is I basically kind of tell a little bit of a story, and then I use emojis because I that's kind of my style, so it goes with me. If you were super formal and corporate, you might not use these, where I'll use an emoji to say like specialties. And that's where you'll see on the bottom of my profile, it's just a ton of keywords with a line that separates them all. I even had a section, or I have a section about like things I sort of do outside of my quote unquote job. Like I wrote a book, I host a podcast, that kind of stuff. So don't sweat this like feeling like it has to be overly formal. You can, or even like the structure. I think the structure can sort of be like, to Jeremy's point, who you are, something that's notable about you that shows that you can achieve and you get outcomes. And then if you're comfortable with emojis, or just have separate it with different paragraphs. I think one thing I do not like on profiles is when it's just like one really long paragraph.
Oh,
So you have to remember that people are people skim more than they read, and so breaking it up into lots of smaller paragraphs, I think that's become more important in later years.
yeah. No one looks at text walls. And
Yeah.
here's another little hack too. Even if you don't want to use emojis, you can actually copy and paste bullet point symbols into your LinkedIn to any section to make it much more organized, much more easier to scan, as Lauren said. If you want to find those, just go to my profile, Lauren's profile, copy those symbols and paste them into your own, and you'll see that they come right through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I know. Summary versus about. Oh, here's a question I have for you. What do you think about using first person in the about or summary? I've
Yeah,
been
good question.
told by other career coaches and other recruiters, I don't really necessarily have a preference, but a lot of people do not like it. They don't even want, like, they don't want you to say Jeremy, and they don't want you
Yeah.
to say I. They just want you to sort of write like, for example, my opener is like people leader with 10 plus years experience. Like I almost like didn't know which side to choose. So I chose no side. What's your thought on it?
Yeah. So I go back to that famous Steve Jobs quote, that good artists copy, great artists steal. And what's behind that is that when you steal, you are being inspired by the best and the brightest. So here's what I want to challenge everyone to do. Go to the profile of the person that you want to become. Maybe you want to become a star podcaster. Go to Lauren's profile. Maybe you want to work at Apple. Go find an Apple employee's profile. Look at how they're doing it. Those typically represent the norms of that industry and of that field. And chances are, if that got them the job that you want, it can do the same for you. So when
Yeah.
in doubt, learn from those who've gone before.
Yeah. And I also, one of my little hacks with that is like find 5 job descriptions or start saving the job descriptions that you apply for, like in a Google Doc or a Word doc. And then also find the 5 profiles. And then one weekend, make it sort of your, I guess, project where you go through these job descriptions and you highlight common words or phrases like what is
Yes,
it that draws you to these things. Same with the profile, and you will start to find these puzzle pieces, and those are the things, process of elimination. So I
I
know that's
love
like a
that.
bigger project, but I really like that kind of stuff because the idea of your personal brand representing you so well and having that clarity. So going back to the first part about once you have that focus, it feels so good because you're like, I don't know where I'm going, but like I know what I want now. And so now you just, I don't know, you just walk through life with a lot more confidence
That's right.
about that.
How can you achieve a goal if you don't know what the goal
Yeah,
is?
exactly. Exactly. It's like I always used to say this. I'm like, I don't lack um ambition, I lack direction. Like that was how I felt in the beginning of my career. And this is the combination of like, well, now you're ambitious and you know your direction. So it's kind of like, okay, watch out, world, get out of the way.
Woohoo. I love it.
Okay, so let's go into tip number 4 that you have.
Yeah. So this is all about the skill section. And this is actually some really good news. So basically, LinkedIn, even though it's taking things away, trying to force you to buy LinkedIn Premium, is giving you one goodie this year. And that is because they are so all in on this idea of skills-based hiring, not hiring based on diplomas, not hiring based on pedigree, but based on the actual skills you have. They have increased the cap on the skill section from 50 to 100. And what I see, Lauren, because I'm doing these reviews every day, is most people have 20, 30 skills, which means they're leaving 60, 70, 80 skill slots basically just vacant, gathering digital dust.
Yeah.
Every one of those slots could be filled up with a keyword from those JDs you were talking about. And here's a little AI hack. If you want to figure out what are the most common keywords across 10 or 20 job descriptions, paste them all into ChatGPT and say, what are the most common keywords across all these JDs? ChatGPT does the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Your weekend project can actually turn into a 30-minute project
I
thanks
know I
to
just ruined the
ChatGPT.
weekend. Oh no.
No, no, no. This is great news for all of us. The other thing you can do with your skills that I think is important is you can rearrange them. So even if, for example, years ago you had social media as a skill set and it's been endorsed 100 times, and you're like, but I don't really want to go into social
Yeah.
media. I really want to go into content marketing. Fine, list it as a skill and then move it to the top. You can rearrange your skills. And look, people read from the top down. And so I always tell people, I'm like, put the most important information at the top. Same thing with your experience, especially right now, there are plenty of people who have multiple situations going on at the same time. Put the most important one or the one that you think would be the most relevant to the recruiter up at the top. So even if you have 4 side hustles, put the one at the top that matters the most.
Yeah.
At
Here's a
least
question for
LinkedIn
you,
hasn't
Lauren.
taken that away. Mm-hmm.
How many seconds on average would you spend looking through a profile back in your Hulu days?
Like 5, because
Right.
well, and the reason why I was so fast with them is because they're all the same, right? So
Yes.
resume, it takes me a little second to be like, okay, where is everything? But LinkedIn profiles are all the same. So I'm so quick. And I would agree with you. I would do headline, experience, and then I would go, no, sorry, headline. Yeah, headline, experience, and then summary or about section. So I actually didn't read the about until I figured out your headline and your experience was going to work for us. And again, I had a hiring manager who would tell me like I'm looking for XYZ. So I'm looking for certain things very quickly just to be like this with your is it worth finding your resume and going further with you?
Yeah. No, I love that because I think so often we get so caught up in these doom loops of, oh, what are we going to put in our hobbies section on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And the reality is no human recruiter is ever going to read that. So better
I
to
will
focus on the
say
things that matter.
this is how I feel also about recommendations. Like some people, but here, like some people love them, right? And some hiring manager told some recruiter out there, I don't want to hire someone without a recommendation. So I always tell them, like, you have to understand the hiring process is humans making decisions about other
Yes.
humans. Like, it's so subjective. So I still think you're best off having a very filled out, complete, optimized profile, because you never know. Someone might start with the summary section and then go to experience. And so that was my experience. But I, it's like I had a hiring manager once who didn't want to interview people without reading their cover letters. And I know people have very strong feelings about that. And I always tell them, like, you just don't know. That's the unfortunate, not black and white news of this, of applying for jobs. But also sometimes a good thing, like networking we talked about, can like be a really good thing to be able to send your resume directly to someone. Although I'm also seeing more and more people be like, don't send me your resume. I want to keep it really fair. And so, gosh, I don't know. It's like
What a
it
world.
all, I know what a world it all, and it's like, again, like there's no one way to apply for a job. And so that's why it's important, I think, to try a lot of different things, because you just don't know.
Totally.
Um, okay, so your fifth and final tip for building a better LinkedIn profile in 2024 is
Yeah, so it comes back to that referral piece. I know people are going to say, wait a second, I thought these were all profile tips. But this speaks to the fact that people spend too much time in passive mode. Let me just build my profile and they will magically come, Field of Dreams style, versus proactively getting out there and hustling. Um, and the one thing I just wanted to call out is this tool that my team built at LinkedIn, the alumni tool, is still out there. LinkedIn hasn't killed it yet. So I want you to go to your alma mater's page on LinkedIn, whether you were a Trojan or a Spartan or whatever. I don't know whether they're always like these Greek warriors.
yeah.
And then look up the alumni tab inside the school's page, and you will see tens or hundreds of thousands of alums who would be happy to chat with you. And you can filter for a job or a company or a location. Those are your future referrals. Those are the folks who are going to help you get that job.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was saying essentially, when you're trying to make a career transition, it's very hard to use your current network, because usually your current network is based on your current career, right? And so I call it kind of like a bridge network. You need to build sort of
Yeah.
a bridge to this new network. And that is cold networking, informational interviews. Maybe it's warm networking, that you have a friend that can introduce you, or an alumni association. But a really big part, I think, of any successful job search. And here's the thing, even if you network and you find a job through the easy apply button, it's never going to hurt you to network and build new connections. So I love the alumni tip here, because I think it's an easy way to get started with networking. And I do think really successful career transitioners, or people who have lots of different career opportunities, they do prioritize networking. It is something they're just sort of doing on a regular basis.
So true.
Okay, so let's talk about some common LinkedIn profile mistakes to avoid.
Okay, so let's start with number one. And there are three sort of deadly sins here. The first one is that you get fooled into believing that LinkedIn is just another social network. And in fact, it's the boring social network. You're like, okay, I've got my Facebook, I've got my Instagram, I've got my TikTok, I got my Snap. Why do I need a LinkedIn? But the reality is, hopefully, as Lauren has proven to you at this point, recruiters are the reason why. There is a whole universe of a million plus recruiters out there searching your profiles every single day on LinkedIn, which they're not doing on other social media, which means you've got to be on there if you want to have a chance of being found. So
Yeah,
don't fall into that trap. Don't have a great, resume sitting on your hard drive that recruiters can't see. Take that resume, put it online. LinkedIn is the place. Okay, so that's
great.
number one. Number
Hmm.
two is always falling into the trap of focusing on what you're doing today or what you used to do. I have people who say to me, Jeremy, I get it. I am being hounded by recruiters all the time, but they're recruiters who want me to keep doing the same crappy job that I'm doing today, and I'm sick of it. Well, then I say, look at your headline. What does it say? And it says, oh, crappy job at XYZ company. And I'm like, well, that's what they know. Even recruiters with all these powerful tools can't see into your brain. They can't see into your heart. They don't know what you're hungry for unless you tell them, which is why it's so critical not to just focus on the past or even the present, but where you're headed. And you can do that through the headline, through the open to work section, everything we've discussed. And then last but not least, number three deadly sin is being really passive. Again, so many folks have been told by their career coaches, have a great profile, get it set up, as if that was the whole enchilada. Really, they've got the tortilla, they've got the beans, but they're missing the flavor, they're missing the sauce. And that sauce is relationships. And as Lauren has said many times, these are humans making decisions about other humans. Maybe someday AI will take over everything, but Lord help us until that day. Focus on the human algorithm which is we always prefer the confidence that comes with someone we know, someone we trust. And you can build
Yeah.
those relationships on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, while we wrap up, I want to talk about how to use AI to boost your LinkedIn presence. What are your tips for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think every one of these areas succumbs to that same sort of resume writer's block that we've all experienced. Even the best writers amongst us, and we can write really well about someone else, when we write about ourselves, we instantly freeze up. We don't want to brag. We don't want to undercut our accomplishments. How do we do it well? And so for every part of your profile, from your headline to your about section to your experience, I want you to feel comfortable going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, here's the job that I want. Here's the job description. Here's my existing bullet. Give me 3 ways to improve this that would get more keywords and more clear impact. Because again, those are things that recruiters and the algorithm are looking for. Now, I want to be really clear. These are all creative aids, not writing replacement. This doesn't have replace a career coach or an awesome resume. Because if you just paste those things right into your profile, maybe they're totally inaccurate and they get you booted out of the process. Maybe the style is just off and it sounds generic and boring to a recruiter like Lauren. Or maybe it just ultimately a janky experience for everyone involved. Versus if you use that as a little bit of inspiration and you go back and massage it and incorporating into your own style and your own facts, now you've got something that's really powerful because it's the creativity and the universal knowledge of this tool with everything that makes you special.
Okay, Jeremy, I completely agree with that. It's a really good tip. Use it as a compliment. Do not copy and paste. If you, as we wrap up, if you had to summarize your top LinkedIn tip, which I know is tough, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the number one LinkedIn tip today is actually psychological, not technological. This is going to sound crazy. And that is the feeling that you have an internal locus of control. This is a big thing that psychologists have studied, which is the people who perform the best, even during the worst moments, recessions, depressions, whatever. They say, hey, there's a storm raging outside, but I still am the captain of my own ship. I control my destiny. And that is what I believe is the fundamental best use of LinkedIn, is to say, no matter how tough things are, no matter how crazy the economy gets, I still can go out there. I can build relationships. I can find hiring managers. I can plant my flag on my profile, and I can give myself the best odds no matter what the world throws at me.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's such a good place to end and a very empowering place to end. Okay, Jeremy, share where people can, and I'll link to the first episode we did together because you guys should definitely listen to that. It was almost all LinkedIn profile tips, but share where people can find you, learn more about you, get your tips and things like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people at thejobinsiders.com. You can also get a free copy of my Career Coach GPT book for job searching with AI right through that website. So I'd love to hear from folks.
And I will link to Jeremy and I's, both of our LinkedIn profiles so you guys have some inspiration, but also connect with us. Tell us that you heard us on the podcast. That's always really fun. And if LinkedIn will not give you the ability to add a note, don't even worry, because I do not want you to pay for premium just to send us the note that you heard us on the podcast. Just connect. Jeremy, thank you so much again. Love having you on and geeking out on LinkedIn. I love it.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And thanks for everything you're doing for listeners out there. We need it.
Thank you.